In yesterday's video, we talked about things that were hard to hit. Please comment and subscribe below. Thanks a lot for taking part in the discussion as we get ready for Warhammer 40k 8th edition. Anyway, in yesterday's video, we talked about things that were hard to hit or supposedly hard to hit, flyers, and how they really aren't that hard to hit anymore. And there was some, I guess, some concern wrapped around the survivability of some of their vehicles. And I want to say that now all vehicles operate on the same system that every other model operates on, has a toughness and a wounds characteristic. And in Warhammer 40k 7th edition, things that did that, like Wraith Knights and Riptides, were seen as superior to their vehicle kin. And I think that we're going to find that's the case now. I only want to applaud the game for going to this single system because the interest of speeding the game up, us knowing how every model behaves and interacts on one system, kind of one system to rule them all kind of thing, is good. So we talked about how things aren't as hard to hit anymore as they used to be. And that leads to the question of survivability for things like vehicles. Now, a knight, very survivable, and we're going to talk about that in a second. And I think the perception is things that are far less than a knight, half or a third of a knight, are not as survivable. And that's simply not the case because in addition to having toughness and wounds, vehicles also have saves, where they previously only were relying on a cover save, and even that was kind of hard to get sometimes. So I want to talk about a single las cannon being fired by the equivalent of a Space Marine at a night. You know, and this is just all numbers, and I realize, and I apologize, I'm going to be just kind of firing numbers in a row here, but a las cannon hit it on threes hits, basically a little bit over 2/3 of the time. With a strength 9, it's going to be wounding over half the time because it's needing the threes against the toughness 8. Has an armor penetration of 3, but the knight has an invulnerable save. It's going to do an average of 3, probably a 3.5 damage per roll, and that's what it's easy to kind of get lost on, is that we see that D6 for the las cannon and thinking it's going to solve all of our problems. But when you factor in that it still has to wound the knight, and then the knight gets a save, it's not going to do that many wounds, or the percent chance to wound is going to go way down. And then it's only going to do an average, after you factor in everything else, of a single wound per las cannon. That means that to effectively take down this knight on turn 1, you've got to have 23 las cannons to be able to effectively burn down this knight on average. Now, we all know that this is just average. What you're doing is creating all these systems in place where sometimes it's going to be really beneficial to the firer, and sometimes it's going to be really beneficial to the target. But that's kind of the beauty of the game, that there's going to be these swings and dice. But as a matched play enthusiast, I can only kind of look at what the averages tell me, so I can kind of plan off of that. And the same can be said for a rhino. One las cannon, where before could have destroyed a rhino, is probably not going to destroy a rhino once you factor in that the rhino is going to innately have an armor save, and could possibly improve that armor save with cover or psychic powers or whatever down the road. And I know where I'm using imperial equivalents right now, but this applies to same things like a wave serpent, even more to wave serpents with their serpent shields. Anything that has this mechanic of a toughness, a wound, toughness, number of wounds, and the toughness is going to be higher. They're typically pretty good. It's, even las cannons are going to be wounding things on 3s most of the time, if it's a vehicle state. And then the save is huge. That's what throws all of this off. And then when you factor in the average roll to damage, even for something that's D6, it's still only 3.5 damage. It's going to take multiple of these things to burn down vehicles. And that also applies to the flyers. The flyers, even if they don't have any innate protection to their stat for just being in the sky, you got to factor in like targeters and the 41st millennium and all that stuff. But anyway, with their protection going down, their survivability has increased with the fact that they're working on the toughness, save, and wounds mechanic that everything else is operating on now. And I don't want that to get lost. It's like, yes, there can be these swings, and doing things like melted, there's going to be ways to improve your reliability of taking out some of these things, for sure, especially if you're able to, with the melter range, or you bring just enough autocannons to kill your buddy skimmers and stuff like that. There are going to be ways to do that, and there will be turns, when 5 las cannons burn down a knight and everything else. I mean, there are going to be times when that happens, and that's going to be exciting to see. but the math says that's going to not happen very often. So these are the things we need to look at when we're trying to build competitive lists. And if you're shying away from taking a certain thing just because it doesn't behave like you expected it to before, really take a look at what the numbers of what your opponent has to do to now effectively destroy that thing, as opposed to what they used to have to do that. Anyway, again, please comment, subscribe. This has been great as we get ready to move into 5th. Move into 8th edition. This has been a really great dialogue having with folks. I'm enjoying hearing what people are taking on their lists. You can follow me on Twitter also at warmaster_tpm, where I'm sharing a bunch of my work in progress stuff as I'm painting and getting ready to do battle in the 8th edition. Anyway, talk to you soon, guys. Thanks a lot.